Dobry jutro, tubaneros. You might remember this as the dungeon of capitalism, and what better way to begin a video about the Wall Street protests. It's true we're a long way from Wall Street here, but I think in spirit we can still feel its presence. There, of course, as you might recall, was the spot for disposing of defaulters. Here was the crematorium where they were brought, and here, of course, was the deposit chute where they were transferred from various branches. So the protests on Wall Street are a good thing in themselves. It's fine that there are enough people aroused to make them, and it's very easy for those of us not there to sit back and criticize them. But at the same time, one has to ask, what is their larger purpose? What is their focus? They are trying to put upon themselves the mantle of the protests in Egypt, which is fine, but those protests had a specific concrete goal, which was mainly to bring down the president of Egypt as a long-standing tyrant, and to change its government to make it more responsive to the population in general. The problem with this is, though, that the protests on Wall Street don't have such a concrete purpose. They lack that essential focus that can galvanize large numbers of people across classes, across political divides, get them into the streets where it counts to effectively make change. As of now, while it has some momentum, it's still being applauded and patronized by police chiefs and the President of the United States. No one is afraid of these protests. Here is the interrogation room, as you might recall, now used for storage. And until those in power are actually nervous or even afraid, I doubt that much of any concrete good is going to come from the Wall Street protests. Now, I'm not advocating violence by any means. I'm just saying that there is a certain lack of larger purpose, of a goal in these protests to make them really effective as agents of change. A case in point here might be on September 16th, 1920, a bomb was set off in the Bank of Morgan on Wall Street that rattled the entire financial district of New York, which leads one to not to advocate terrorism, but to make analogies with 9/11. That in fact, instead of looking for anarchists throwing bombs or Al-Qaeda flying airplanes into financial buildings, that the real terrorists are in fact right under your nose, that they have infiltrated the highest echelons of government, that their agents are at work in their blue suits deep within every institution of this country, and that they indeed hate the average American for his freedom, that he has too much of it, that he has too much money, that he has too much influence, and that they are out to take this from him in any way possible. They have inflicted an economic terror on the country and its people, and are being allowed to get away with it. So, I think it would behoove the FBI to launch an investigation on Wall Street to bring that nest of terrorists to whatever justice is possible, if the protests on Wall Street now could have that as their guide, as their focus, to demand not just, to demand the impossible would be to bring down the administration, but we're not asking for that. Just simply to bring those accountable to the justice system for the terrorists that they are. I think this is entirely reasonable. If the protesters on Wall Street would announce that as their goal, to bring these people at Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, all the rest, to federal justice for their crimes against the well-being of the United States, I don't think that would be too much to ask. And that would give them a focus, a grievance. There's our ghost again, by the way. I stirred him up. Could be a her. Sounds like high heels. Anyway, it would give them a focus, a concrete goal for galvanizing the protests into a real movement, to put these people in the dock for the criminals they are. Would not be an act of revolution, but it would be a stimulus for bringing those who run Wall Street to accountability, which is more important than mere financial regulation. So, that said, oh, look there. Yeah, well, that said, I think there's great possibility for the movement yet. And although it's quite easy for us who are outside of Wall Street, who are not taking part in the protests, to offer advice from such a far distance, I think if they would foster some concrete goals, some specific courses of action against specific targets, they would go far to creating the kind of mobilized mass movement that they seek. So, that ghost again. But anyhow, no. Knock upon the phone down here. Didn't think the signal would reach down here. Hello? Who? Man, you're gonna have to talk louder. We're way under here. Who's this? J. Edgar Hoover, former director of the FBI. Hey, just the man I was talking about. Listen, you remember that book you wrote, or someone wrote for you many decades ago, Masters of Deceit? Yeah, about the infiltrators and into the highest reaches of government and their propaganda to hoodwink and bamboozle the American people. Well, you know, I think it's time for you to do an update. I think the Masters of Deceit have got their conspiracy going all the way up to the White House, probably even in your own office. I don't know what you can do about it, but we're here to help you. That's right. And thank you for choosing YouTube as your form of communication.